Silence. It is the one thing they never expected from you. They were prepared for your anger. They were ready for your screams. They even braced themselves for your retaliation. But what they never anticipated, what they never even considered, was your silence. And now, that silence is deafening. Once upon a time, they fed off your pain. They thrived on your reactions. Every cruel joke, every mocking whisper, every cold betrayal was meant to provoke you, to make you lash out, to prove them right when they called you too emotional, too sensitive, too weak. But you simply stopped responding. You let their words bounce off you like stones thrown into an abyss, swallowed by the darkness of your indifference. At first they laughed. Oh, look, they've given up. Then they smirked, finally learned their place. And then they noticed something strange. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped justifying your worth. You stopped seeking their approval. And in that moment, something shifted. The balance of power changed, because your silence was no longer surrender. It was a warning. They didn't realize it at first. They carried on as if nothing had changed. The backhanded compliments, the dismissive glances, the way they twisted your kindness into weakness. It was routine for them, second nature. They had spent years crafting their little games, believing themselves untouchable. But something was different now. You no longer reacted. You no longer fought for their acceptance. You just watched, and that made them uneasy. You see, people like them need control. They need to know that their words and actions can dictate how you feel. When you cry, they feel powerful. When you rage, they feel important. But when you do nothing, when you strip away their influence, they panic. Oh! At first, they tried to shake you, to force a reaction. They whispered louder, hoping their poison would finally seep into your mind. They created rumors, designed to drag you back into their game. But you remained silent. And that silence became unbearable. They used to think words were the sharpest weapons. They never realized that silence, true unshaken silence, could cut deeper than any insult. Then, the nightmares began. Not yours, theirs. One by one, they started to crumble. The leader of their pack, the one who once prided themselves on breaking you, began losing sleep. Their jokes weren't landing the same way anymore. They started stammering when speaking to you, suddenly unsure of themselves. Because now, you were watching them, not with anger, not with hate, but with something worse, with indifference. Nothing they said could reach you, no matter how hard they tried. It was as if they no longer existed in your world. And what is worse than being hated? Being forgotten. They couldn't stand it. So, they started slipping, making mistakes, second-guessing their every move. What if you were planning something? What if your silence wasn't just silence, but the calm before a storm? It terrified them. The ones who had laughed at you began looking over their shoulders. The ones who mocked you now whispered your name in hushed voices, worried that you were listening, because, in a way, you were... Oh! You weren't plotting revenge, not in the way they expected. No! Your revenge was already happening. It was unfolding before their eyes, piece by piece. The whispers of their own doubt, the sinking realization that they were powerless without your reactions. You had stripped them of their control, and in doing so, you had given them a taste of their own medicine. Now, they were the ones trapped in a silence they couldn't escape, trapped in a world where their words had no weight, no meaning, no power. And all you did was nothing. But you and I both know this is only the beginning, because once the silence sets in, it does not leave. It grows. It festers. It devours. And by the time they realize what's happening, it will already be too late. They thought they could escape it. They tried to drown it out with noise, with forced laughter, with louder insults, with desperate attempts to drag you back into their twisted little game. But no matter how much they tried to ignore it, Your silence followed them. It was in the spaces between their words, in the hesitation in their voices, in the way their hands fidgeted when they spoke your name. It was consuming them. At first, they convinced themselves that they didn't care. Let them be quiet. It's better this way. They finally know their place. But then something started to change. Their words, once so sharp and cutting, began to lose their edge. Their confidence, so unshakable before, began to crack. Because something felt wrong. They had spent so long feeding off your pain, watching you flinch, watching you defend yourself. And now, that fuel was gone. They expected you to break, to shatter under the weight of their silence. But instead, it was them who were breaking. Their own words felt empty now. Their victories felt hollow. Because what was the point of a game if the other player refused to play? They had built their whole existence around making you react. Without that, without you, they had nothing. And then the whispers started. Not from you. No, you never needed to speak. These whispers came from the people around them. The same ones who once cheered for them, who found amusement in their cruelty. Now, they were watching too, because when you stopped responding, something incredible happened. People started noticing them for who they really were. Without you as their scapegoat, their behavior stood out. Their cruelty had no mask, no excuse, no justification. It was raw and exposed, left bare for the world to see. And one by one, people began stepping back. Their so-called friends grew distant. The ones who used to laugh at their jokes now avoided their gaze. The ones who stood beside them started questioning. Why are they like this? Because now they had nothing to hide behind. And the silence, it wasn't just yours anymore. It was growing, spreading, swallowing them whole. They told themselves it was just a phase. People will come around. Things will go back to normal. But deep down they knew. They felt it in the way people hesitated before speaking to them. They saw it in the way conversations would die when they entered the room. They heard it in the absence of laughter when they tried to joke, when they tried to humiliate someone else, only to be met with uncomfortable silence. That silence, it was familiar. It was the same silence they had forced upon you. And now, it was theirs. Days turned into weeks. Their presence, once commanding, now felt small. They were left alone with the echoes of their own cruelty, and for the first time they understood. They felt what you had felt, the emptiness, the isolation, the weight of being unheard, unseen, dismissed. And yet, there was one crucial difference. You had chosen your silence. But them, they were drowning in it. No matter how much they reached for the past, no matter how hard they tried to pull people back in, nothing worked, because the world had moved on, and they were left behind. Then, one of them broke, the strongest, the loudest, the one who led the charge against you, the one who thought themselves untouchable. They came to you, not with their usual arrogance, not with their usual venom, but with hesitation, with fear. They called your name, testing the waters, desperate for a response. And you simply looked at them. You didn't smile. You didn't frown. You didn't acknowledge them as anything more than a passing thought. And that was when they knew it was over. They had already lost. Because your silence, it was never weakness. It was power. And now they realized it. Too late. It was over. They knew it. They felt it. And yet they refused to accept it. Because how could someone they once saw as beneath them, someone they belittled, mocked, and discarded, hold this much power? How could you, the one they had tried to silence, be the reason they could no longer hear anything but the emptiness in their own minds? But that was the beauty of it. You never had to raise your voice. You never had to fight, to prove yourself, to seek revenge. You simply removed yourself. And in doing so, you took everything from them. Now, they were desperate. They tried to make amends. not because they were sorry. No, that would require self-awareness, something they still lacked. They wanted relief. They wanted forgiveness, not because they deserved it, but because they needed to be acknowledged again, to be someone again. They reached out, offering empty apologies, half-hearted regrets. But you just watched, not with hatred, not with malice, with nothing. And that was what truly broke them. One by one, the others followed. Some tried to pretend as if nothing had happened. Hey, it's been a while. How have you been? Some tried to rewrite history. You know we were just messing around, right? It wasn't that serious. Some even tried to guilt you. I don't know why you're acting like this. It's like you want to make us feel bad, but you saw through them. You always had. And now, they knew you did. No matter how many times they tried to draw you back into their world, they realized something terrifying. They had lost all access to yours. You had moved on, and in your silence, you thrived. Everything they said you couldn't do, you did. Everything they swore you wouldn't become, you became. And they were still stuck, still running in circles, still clinging to their old ways, still pretending they were the ones in control. But everyone saw the truth now. Everyone saw the cracks in their confidence, the desperation in their eyes, the way they clung to a past where they still held power. But that past was gone. It had vanished the moment you chose silence over suffering. And now, there was nothing left for them. You see, revenge doesn't always come in screams. Sometimes, it comes in whispers. Sometimes, it comes in the slow, steady realization that the person they tried to break is no longer within their reach. And the worst part, they did this to themselves. They had the chance to value you, to respect you, to see you, but they chose cruelty. And now, the world had moved on without them. And you stood at the top, not because you fought for their approval, but because you learned you never needed it in the first place. And that is a lesson they will never forget. Because long after the echoes of their words fade, your silence will still remain.